Well, I'm showing 301 and I really like to respect everybody's time. And so my name is Jason White. I work here at MARC, and uh, we're going to introduce Donna Lake, who will facilitate this conversation today with Dante and Matt. Uh, Donna Lake serves as the co-chair of the Regional Resource Sharing, the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee. And under the auspices of that committee, the Regional Resource Sharing Agreement was developed. And so it's under the auspices of that body here at MARC. Donna has served here in the region for more than 31 years in emergency response and public service. She retired as fire chief in Kansas City, Missouri back in October. From there, she took on a new role as assistant city manager in the city of Lee Summit. She has been actively engaged in the RHSCC since starting as co-chair of the Regional Enhanced Hazmat Teams effort in 2007. Her leadership in the region and beyond has been shown through significant emergency and non-emergency activities such as the Kim Central Fire, Joplin Tornado, 2012 All-Star Game, the World Series events, COVID-19 pandemic, and our Super Bowl parade. It solidified her belief in the significance of the work being done by the RHSCC, and we appreciate her willingness to facilitate today's conversations. And so we'll turn the ball over to Donna. Thanks, Donna.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. So as you heard, Donna Lake here, and we are having a webinar to talk about the Regional Resource Sharing Agreement, which is just another tool in the toolbox when it comes to all of the planning, coordination, and emergency preparedness efforts that we've done through the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee. Really, part of the conversation, or most of the conversation, will be handled by Dante and Matt May. So I'll give a brief introduction of Dante and Matt, and let them kind of kick off. You see before you, we're sharing a slide presentation with you. So Dante is the emergency manager for the City of Independence, where he's been since 2014. And previously he's worked for the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency, so SEMA, and the American Red Cross, and he's been in emergency management since 1986. So welcome, Dante. And Matt May is the Director of Emergency Management for the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas since 2014, and he's worked previously with Johnson County, Kansas in emergency management as well. So welcome, Matt. And like me, both of them have been involved in the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee and preparedness efforts for many, many years. So Dante, we'll let you kind of kick it off.
Thank you, Donna. And good afternoon, everybody. So we're just taking a few minutes to go through this document and this development in the region, which is very significant. So if we don't answer your questions, or you do have a question following this, please don't hesitate to ask. So the Regional Sharing Agreement, or as we'll refer to it as the RSA, is a document meant to supplement what's already really out there in terms of mutual aid. Mutual aid is a long-standing process, as most of you know, in emergency services. But there are definitely have been what we might call gaps or shortcomings, or some areas where we could improve our mutual aid systems. And so this was this was really identified by many of our participants, many of the stakeholders throughout our family and friends system in this region. And so it was decided that there really ought to be a step forward, an enhancement of our ability to help each other. Thus, the RSA process was born. And it's a written agreement. And it's been submitted to many jurisdictions, if not all, throughout the region. I probably wouldn't say all yet, but it's already been submitted to many, and quite a few jurisdictions have signed on to it. It's an umbrella agreement that helps fill the gaps between all the other mutual aid type agreements and kind of also sets a foundation for future agreements to build on. And it is, by no means is it everything that anybody would ever want, but it's certainly a huge step forward. And so it's going to probably be a work in progress. So we'll be working on it as we go forward. As you know, resources have traditionally been thought of maybe more like law enforcement or fire response or EMS response, but really we need all kinds of resources these days. And with the type of disasters we face, we've had a pandemic, we've had ice storms, we've had human services issues, we've had hazardous materials incidents, and the list goes on and is ever expanding. So the types of resources needed will continue to grow. So maybe you might think that traditional mutual aid has involved fire trucks and squad cars and law enforcement personnel and fire personnel and so forth. But really, we've learned that resources can also include a public information officer or PIO. Could involve some kind of truck or a bulldozer with a driver, maybe for even a training event. It could be help with a festival, storm cleanup, volunteers of all types. And in my particular case, I think of, since we administer the Medical Reserve Corps program of Kansas City, I'm thinking in terms of sharing volunteers who may be medical professionals, volunteers, or lay people serving to help the Medical Reserve Corps as we shift them or help or send them all across the metro area. So we've learned that, we really need to expand our definition and understanding of what a resource is. So we want to be able to share these resources in time of crisis or an emergency, but maybe also possibly in exercises and training events, and other types of activities that may allow us to really help each other. And the more we do that, I think the better. And obviously we can improve our capabilities greatly with all the resources in our region at each other's disposal, more or less. We can really improve our capabilities quite a bit. So does this document add some clarity? Yes. And it does define what types of resources that we can share. We're still working on improving that, because hopefully we'll define all the types of resources that can be included in a resource sharing agreement through the regional planning efforts that MARC has undertaken to lead. With a resource annex for the regional coordination guide, we'll have even a greater clarity as to what resources might be available. And it would also might help to define that process a little bit better. There's been some clarity already with some limited mutual aid processes that involve law enforcement and fire in the Kansas City area between Kansas and Missouri. Some of that is put into state statute, but really we want to talk about, can public works folks help each other? Can community development folks help each other? Can folks that public information officers we mentioned, but can management personnel from jurisdictions help each other? And of course, I believe they can. So this RSA agreement helps create the opportunity to do all that, creates a working system so we can share resources to a much greater degree over a much broader front. In addition, it does help define liability and sharing. And so if we're going to help another jurisdiction, we want to be clear about what kind of liability issues are at hand and who might be responsible for something happening that we didn't expect, if someone gets hurt, and so forth. So the RSA helps define that a bit better. And it also helps define how we might seek reimbursement and so forth in case there's a need to do that. Now, we don't have to do that. So far, mutual aid has been sort of a free of charge kind of arrangement and understanding between the Kansas and Missouri, but this will just sort of further clarify that and allow us to, if we need to, we can seek and work out a system of reimbursement. And this would not interfere with the already existing systems that would be required by, for instance, if there's a federal declaration and if there's a need to seek a reimbursement process through public assistance, for instance, this system would just complement that and provide a mechanism for doing just that. So should be able to help clarify that process. Anyway, this was a long time in coming. Folks like Jason White worked on this extraordinarily diligently and helped guide us through it. And it was, I hate to use the word tedious because that would imply that it was an unpleasant process. It was not, but there was a lot of minutia that had to be addressed in terms of statutes and so forth. So it really, but it took somebody like Jason and really the cooperation of all the team members engaged in writing this RSA and developing it to get this done. So we engaged with emergency management, police, fire, EMS, public works, and public information folks. And we also discussed this with state emergency management officials from Kansas and Missouri. We consulted with FEMA and with a regional council of governments that have used such a process before, and took advantage of whatever we could in terms of existing systems and processes. So it was a long time in coming, but it's really quite a good agreement, very well vetted and researched. So with that, I think I'll turn this back to Matt May, and I'll stand by to support Matt on this next discussion on this next slide number 4.
Do we have Matt?
I think you're not hearing you, Matt.
Well, if we don't have Matt and while he's getting up and running, then, you know, Dante kind of alluded to a lot of the different statutes and programs that we already have in place. You know, if, for example, in Missouri, we've had mutual aid for a long time. And then we've also been able to share law enforcement across state lines, and you see some of the different statutes and acts and regulations that have allowed that. But one of the things that with this agreement that's important is to understand that this is really the governments coming together and saying, hey, we support the idea of being able to share resources across organizations. And just like Dante said, in the case of you know, fire and EMS and police are all able to you know, they share resources on a regular basis, but in some instances, it may be that it may be that we need some other type of assistance where, you know, I can give an example of, you know, we had a fire going across 470 highway. And in that case, you know, we had lots of auto aid and mutual aid partners there, but what we used was Lee Summit Police Department's drone. This was when I was with Kansas City. And so we don't have a direct relationship of auto aid necessarily with the Lee Summit Police Department. And so this type of an agreement gives kind of that overarching coordination and cooperation. So had that become a larger event, you know, it just helps define that, you know, those officers are still covered under their work comp and those sorts of things. You know, our firefighters are covered under our work comp if we had needed a backhoe or some other large piece of equipment that Kansas City couldn't have provided. You know, Lee Summit could have provided that. And so I think that's really what this agreement is getting to is thinking outside of the box of all of the different agencies. You know, we used a lot of regional resources during the pandemic and shared a lot of equipment and information and PPE and all of those things. And in some cases we repay in kind, and then the agency responsible goes through the reimbursement process if there is a reimbursement process. So there's a lot of different ways that we can cover how we share resources. And so I think this just helps define and kind of gets different governments to say, hey, we are here to share those resources. Did we get Matt online? Is he? I know he was talking and we had some audio issues.
So
Doesn't
he's
look like
there
Matt.
and his mic appears to be connected, but for some reason we can't hear Matt.
Okay. So again, these are, on this slide, it just talks about the Stafford Act and some of the Kansas side regulations and Missouri side regulations, as we've looked at this document, and some of the things that allow us to share resources across state lines. So.
And I might add, Donna, this is Dante, that again, these well-researched statutes, both sides of the state line and in federal statutes, we were careful that they would not conflict with the RSA, or that the RSA would not conflict with these statutes. And so that's our stance at the moment. Of course, things could come up, but because of the complexity of law with 2 states and multiple jurisdictions, but basically it looks that we think that this RSA is compatible with all the statutes and federal, state statutes and ordinances that you see there.
And I would say that, most of the agencies that have come on board and governments that have, local governments that have signed the agreement, their law departments have individually looked at the agreement as well, and either made some tweaks or made some suggestions, making it more amenable and allowable for them to sign and join with this agreement. So I don't know if we want to go to the next slide. And Dante, I don't know if you want to talk about some of this or.
Sure. So the RSA, as we've said before, does not disrupt normal day-to-day mutual aid. So if Kansas City Fire heads over to the Kansas side to help out, as they have done numerous times, and probably vice versa, then this does not affect that. Their day-to-day mutual aid stands as it has been. And if the RSA can enhance that process, all to the good. But we wanted to be sure that first, do no harm, so to speak, was our intent with the RSA. And so longstanding systems such as that are not affected by the RSA. And so you can count on what's happened over really decades to continue. And Donna talked a little bit about that and how that works. So that process continues. As I mentioned, the RSA does not really disrupt the access to FEMA funding. So this was a major point of study and research, and we felt like we needed to have the discussion with FEMA and state public assistance folks. And we believe that the RSA does not disrupt the process of accessing FEMA, particularly public assistance funding, if all the criteria are met for public assistance under FEMA. And so we made a point to clarify that. So most of the time, probably the vast majority of such events as mutual aid will not result in financial exchanges or settlements as to reimbursement and so forth. That's been the history. But if there's a huge event, a huge disaster, and likely to be declared federal disaster, there might be, because there might be a need to have extended operational support from another jurisdiction to any particular affected jurisdiction, in which case it would make sense that there would be a recourse to seek assistance or reimbursement under eligible conditions from the state and feds. So that is still a part of this process. The RSA allows for that. And given that we've had this discussion with our counterparts at various levels of local, state, and federal government, we think this process will stand, and the RSA will support the effort in a sense that we have a written agreement, written understanding, could be part of our plans and included in our local emergency operations plans, and helps allow for documentation should it be needed for reimbursement. And so if the RSA is used and followed, and there's enough activity that there needs to be a discussion about reimbursement, we should have additional documentation or support for that. Because as most of you know, when we talk about public assistance reimbursement, I know that FEMA tends to like, the state tends to want to see an agreement, uh, and something in the plan, in local plans, to support the public assistance eligible operations. So the RSA does that. The agreements, the signed agreements by jurisdictions accepting the RSA, those two documents together, plus all the normal documentation that's required, goes a long way to support funding and reimbursement through public assistance, or if needed, directly between jurisdictions. So that is an option here as well, and the RSA allows for agreement between entities for payment. So if it could be that there might be a need to do that as well. It's happened throughout the country. So that's one, but that allows for that, and I think it gives us that flexibility. Not that I think we've used that that I'm aware of there, but certainly not on a large scale. But it's there if we need it. And also, and Donna talked about this a little bit, the RSA does assign liability. So the basic premise is the providing jurisdiction, I believe, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but the providing jurisdiction, assisting an affected jurisdiction really maintains responsibility and liability for its personnel and equipment. So, which is the system really that most mutual aid systems use. Missouri, MOSCO for Missouri, which is the mutual aid doctrine, and which is available online, pretty much does the same thing. So that's so I think that the financial component is a little bit more lucid and clarified in this process.
So this is a list of all of the participants that helped develop the RSA. And so as you can see, our emergency management committee was very heavily involved in the development of this. And, you know, obviously the RHSCC policy board reviewed it. And as I said, you know, I know various jurisdictions, when they've looked to adopt it, they've had their legal teams review the document as well. But really, I want to, you know, thank Independence, Johnson County, Kansas, Casey Moe, Leavenworth, Lee Summit, Johnson County. We got Johnson County, Kansas. Oh, Medact, sorry. Olathe, Overland Park, and at Platte County, Wyandotte County. Those emergency managers really, for the, you know, work and dedication they put into this document. You know, and like Dante said, it does not commit any more resources. It just says that, hey, if we have the resources available, you know, we're committed to being part of this regional effort if we can. So with that, if you guys have any questions, Dante and I will be happy to answer. Matt can answer them in the chat if his microphone's not working, or Jason's here to help answer questions as well. So I will open it up to any questions you guys have. And as we wait, or as you formulate a question, I will say we did have a question in the chat about sharing this. You know, this may be something that you want to share if you haven't taken this to your city leadership or county leadership. But we will share the slides. Jason White will send those out to the participants. And then, of course, this has been recorded as well. So if there's particular information you want to go back and listen to, we can get you a copy of that as well.
Yeah, this is Pete Knudsen of Pleasant Valley. I have a question just about actually getting a copy of the document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Jason, are you the one that would send that out to everybody, the actual resource sharing agreement? And I don't know if it's somewhere on the MARC website anywhere or not.
It is not on the MARC website yet. It will get there along with a list of who has signed, and so that's visible. What we may do is, I believe, Catherine, from the registration, we can probably just send a copy of that out to everybody that's registered, and make sure, a little redundancy there, but make sure everybody's got a copy. So we will head it your way, sir.
Gotcha. And really, Jason, did you see the question in the chat about private companies versus public? You know, I think it's really the members of that are involved in RHSCC and Mid-America, you know, the Mid-America Regional Council effort.
The one national group region that we sort of took a lot of advice from had created several years downstream after their regional document had been well developed, meaning everybody was pretty well on board. Then they looked at hospitals and other sort of private entities, and they created sort of I'm not sure the word I'm searching for, but sort of a codicil, sort of an addendum that they could participate with. We have not brought that idea to the RHSCC for consideration because we're still so new in this conversation, as Donna said, with the primary groups we've got to deal with, but not forgotten.
Gotcha. So I hope that, Mary, did that answer your question? I hope that, that may be a future consideration for private entities.
I believe that, and that was, Donald, that was a discussion I believe we had. We thought that would be a useful component to have. There were some complexities to it, so we really thought let's stick with governmental initially, but I think that would be a next phase for the group to look at is how can voluntary or private not-for-profit organizations, for instance, be involved too. So it's well worth a future discussion.
And I'm going to say a term that goes back a ways, but it kind of is more reminiscent of the Operation Bulldozer plan, right? So, which did have some private company participation in it.
Absolutely, that's true. There might be two phases to this, maybe not-for-profit or civic organizations, and then there might be for-profit or private companies as well. Yeah. So worth looking at both.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? All right, Jason, you want to wrap us up or?
I think we very much appreciate Donna and Dante and Matt taking a swing at it for us. Homework assignments, we will get a copy of the document out. And as Donna and Dante have said, if you've got other questions, please email us. And we're happy to try to attend your local council or meetings to answer questions for other bodies. And we appreciate the suggestions around the other private entities as this evolves. But thank you very much for your time, and very much appreciate Donna, Dante, and Matt taking their time and their expertise to provide that to everybody today. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.